Welcome, adventurers. Today's episode will be a little different because today I use this to make all of these. I've wanted to make a sci-fi sewer system for a long time, and I wanted to make a diorama for a long time, so I combined the two. I can find fantasy sewers all over the internet. Thingiverse and my Minifactory has a ton, but sci-fi ones I just could not find. So I made my own. I did that with Mesh Mixer. I'm no 3D modeling expert or anything, but this is the basis of it, and I think it turned out pretty well. Ultimately, I designed them so that they could be printed without support on an FDM printer. All the pieces can just line up on there. You can resize them. These are 3" by 3" squares. The walls are a bit taller than that, obviously. I think they were 3.5, 4 inches, but I designed them so that you could make straight sections, corners, like 90-degree corners, 3-way intersections of pipe, 4-way intersections, ones with a sewer drain in the bottom of it, floor grates as well as floor panels with doors and just reinforced crossbars. Wall panels the same, also with ladders and one with greebles. I made a ton. And of course, I needed something to populate that, so I used some Loot Studios cyberpunk type figures from a couple of their releases. They didn't sponsor this, neither does Prusa, I just have one, and neither does Elegoo, even though some of this is printed on my Elegoo Jupiter as well. But yeah, I wanted to do this. I was inspired by Boyle Eye and Alex at 52 Miniatures. They do dioramas that are amazing. They're obviously very talented, and I wanted to contribute something to this section as well. And it's my channel, and I wanted to do something for me. And so that was a diorama. As you can see here, they're modular. I designed them to have little peg holes so that you could push them together and pull them apart to create a variety of things. However, I haven't mastered that part yet. So ultimately I ended up snipping off the pegs and sanding the section down a bit so that I could just glue them together. And this is a diorama anyway, so it doesn't need to be modular. But yeah, the filament ones have a lot more, we'll say, artifacts at the bottom of the valley of the pipes, whereas the resin printed ones clearly don't. Very clean. The wall sections, some are beveled. I created inside corners, outside corners, left to right, right to left, and all kinds of things. Basically, I made it so that you can make just about any kind of setup you want with these. And ultimately, I will make these files freely available to all of my patrons, assuming I ever get any. There's ladder sections, like I said, a greeble section, pipe sections, grates, all kinds of stuff for both the walls, the floors. And obviously they don't stand up well on their own. But you put any tile section in there and they do a great job. So here it is all glued together. I'm surprised at the ability to do this all without having any real knowledge or ability on how. I just kind of started messing around with Mesh Mixer and created these things. And you can see the sewer end caps on the left there. They're a little thinner than the rest of it, so I have to adjust that with some chipboard later. It's because I made those after the fact, and they don't quite fit in. Now, I'm no master painter, so I'm going to use the, I guess, slap chop method, as it's seen it called online, where you paint them black and then you dry brush them with white, and then you use speed paints or contrast paints to paint everything. I know it's not terribly exciting, but I am not at the level of any of the internet painters yet by any stretch. I try, but I'm not great. This was an effective method. It allowed me to get varying contrasted colors without having to put in tons of work, and it was very quick to do. So just a few little colors here to add to this little cyber team and kind of flesh them out. Green and blue seems to be their little team colors. A little purple, and of course all their cybernetic components are metallic, and all those got a dark tone on them. Now this piece I picked up at Beckman's Gaming Paradise in Twin Falls, Idaho when I was there a month or so ago. I don't need the base. I don't need the packaging. But if you find yourself in Twin Falls, stop by Beckman's. Very friendly owner. He's always there. And it's a fun little place. Locally owned and operated. I got his permission to show his storefront and mention his business here, so that way maybe you'll show him a little love if you're there. Now this base I don't like, so we're going to chop it off. Oh, goodness, it's graphic. Well, while that's happening, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification icon, and if you haven't, become a patron. Now these WizKids models, it's the first one I've ever utilized in any capacity whatsoever, and there was some weird gaps from where they're kind of made in pieces and glued together. So I used some milliput to fill those in. And I want them to have a tongue. This is, I think it's a frost salamander, I think is what it was called. But I wanted to have some sort of tongue, snake-like tongue. So I used the leftover milliput to do that. And then we go on to painting it. I cover the whole thing in this necrotic flesh color, so that its underbelly, when it's all done, is kind of this sickly greenish hue. Because, I mean, this thing lives in a sewer. It can't be very healthy for you. Crawling around in sewer pipes with everything that's in sewer pipes. So, yeah. It definitely needed some sickly coloring. Then I went on with this Warlock Purple and created this kind of pink, well, kind of salamandery looking color over the whole back of it. And I did that along the broadest parts of the back and down all 6 of the arms, all the way to the tip of the tail. And I did that pretty wide, making sure to keep it only on top of the creature. And then I take some orc blood colored paint here to darken the center parts, kind of creating a fade from this light pink to this dark purple over the entirety of it. And I put this only at the centermost parts of the back, all the way down to the tail and onto the legs. Ultimately, I think it turned out pretty cool looking, as you see here. And then I wanted to give it a highlight to all those recesses and whatnot. Well, I guess it's a low light, whatever you want to call it. I'm giving it a green shade over the entirety of it to bring out all of the little details. And so when it's on the bottom, it makes those look greener, and oddly enough on the top it makes it look more purpley pinkish colored, like that. I wanted the mouth to look wet and menacing, so this glistening blood paint effect is what I used on the tongue and the inside of the mouth. I thought that added a nice touch of realism. And I wanted to have kind of sickly looking demonic eyes, and I have this demonic yellow. So here's a little bit of that into the eyeball to make it look nice and yellow, wiping away some of my over painting there. And Drake's tooth, of course, for the teeth and the claws. I mean, it's in the name, so might as well use it. So paint all the teeth and claws with that. And of course they're too bright, so we're going to give it a little dark tone to bring that down a bit, just like that. Make it look like this thing has been eating whatever it can in the sewer, I suppose. Now I wanted to have vertical split pupils, and I definitely do not have the skills to do that on such a small scale, but this fine tip Sharpie does. And so, there we go. Now if you watched my last video, you saw how I did weathering effects with masking fluid. And here I use a stiff bristle brush to scrub away the paint to reveal the rust color base coat underneath. Of course it's a rust colored base coat, and then white, and then the bright yellow. Using an X-Acto knife, I come through and give it some scrapes and nicks and cuts into the surface. Now we need decals for it, so I use these laser printer clear water slide decals. I've used them in a few videos. As you can see, you can make all kinds of stuff. Warning signs, the ISO warning signs, jet thrust exhaust, graffiti, whatever you want. So, utilizing some of those, I cut out some very, very small ones. When I say small, I think they're no bigger than 5 millimeters tall. Right there, to put onto my barrels. Soak them in water, use a paintbrush to kind of remove them from their backing, and then stick them to the surface you want them to be on. You want to do this before you do any kind of weathering washes, otherwise you'll lose it. Of course, I painted everything there with the same rust base, and I'm using an elephant gray to sponge on color to this whole section, being sure not to overcoat it because I want the rust to show through, as you see here. Now I'm going to pick out a few details to paint black, a couple of the pipes sticking out of the wall, and the upper edges of the actual sewer pipes themselves, like that. Now basing sludge makes it return because we need something sludgy and gross in the bottom of sewer pipes, so I figured a brown sludgy material would be perfect. If you want to see how I made that, check out one of my earlier videos, the fortress video. Here are some leftover plaster rocks for piles of, we'll call it debris in the sewer. I leopard spot them off camera. You can see my technique in my cliff face video. Here I'm breaking up some popsicle type sticks with pliers, and using that saw I scrape a wood grain into it because there always seems to be some sort of broken wood in the sewers. Now with the same strong tone I used earlier, I'm going to stain the wood to make it look old and weathered. I know these aren't exciting techniques, or hopefully not boring, but I find that instead of trying to paint wood to look like wood, I take wood and put stain on it to make it look like stained wood. It seems to be a more realistic way of doing wood in my opinion, but you can do it however you want. Now I've glued all those things into place, the little boxes, the barrels, the wood, and now I'm putting a brown wash all over everything. Again, this is a sewer, so it seemed like an appropriate color. But brown wash on everything, running down on all surfaces, the grid at the bottom, you name it, it got brown washed. And then I was more selective with the black wash, creating streaks and grimy bits like leaks and whatnot, and that effect is created by hitting it with a spray bottle of water just to make it run, breaking the capillary action. It makes more accurate looking streaks. Now these things are called cuvettes. They're used in lab equipment. I thought they made great light fixtures. The rounded part on the tab I cut off flush and found they fit right on these panels in between the cross supports. So I drill some holes after I painted what would be the mounting fixture for the lights, which is the base of it. Drill some holes, and then I'll super glue these into place just like that over those holes. Of course, I sanded the backs of these so that there was more grip for that surface area to adhere to. Now these are pretty amazing little photo string lights that I got at the Dollar Tree. 10 strips, they're really bright, surprisingly, run off of 2 AA batteries. But yeah, there are 10 lights. Now, because of the spacing, I couldn't put more than 1 light in each one of the light fixtures, which is fine. So 4 of them end up getting wasted. I paint them black and they get hidden behind the backing anyway. Now to create, to prevent bubbles from coming up when I do the pour of resin later, I'm going to coat everything with some gloss varnish, and that also helps to seal up any cracks and crevices that I may have missed with super glue. Speaking of super glue, I'm going to use that to adhere my big bad monster and one of the characters into the sewer pipe. I want to make sure that they stay in place and don't potentially float or move around once I begin pouring the resin. That big creepy looking thing gets glued in right there. I've used tape to create walls, dams for the resin so it doesn't run out, and a little burnt umber ink in this because in my original testing for this I found it worked really well. Even though my resin pour initially failed with this when I tried to mold things, I found that when I poured it in an open area like I'm going to do here, definitely looks like sewer water. Oof. But when I pour it in situations like this, it works out really well, and in this case it was a perfect pour. Very few bubbles. I was able to burst most of them with a lighter. And now I cover up the front. I toyed with a lot of ideas on how to make this front more uniform, but ultimately decided plaster was the way to go. And so this ready mix stuff by DAP works really great. You can get it at the hardware store. Wherever you live, it might be called something else, but it's fundamentally the same stuff. It's already mixed plaster. 320 grit sandpaper to smooth out and kind of make the surface uniform. And of course, masked off with painter's tape to make sure I didn't get dust all over the inside of my diorama. Here's where I was talking about, where I used some chipboard painted black and some hot glue to cover up the backs of these after the resin has set. I used tape over that grate initially, but here we go to make it an endless void inside of the grated sewer. Once those two are in place there, and on the next corner where the other side of that sewer grate opens, I clad everything in in foam core, and then cover up all the exposed edges with chipboard. Now I'm going to use the secret of gloss Mod Podge to create a water effect, because there's creature moving, the sewer water's flowing, so it's got to have some texture to it. So using a stippling technique, I kind of create ripples and undulations on the water. I even make some not very noticeable concentric rings coming out from both the cyborg lady that's in the water as well as the giant monster. And while that's drying, I super glue in the rest of the figures and cover everything with black flat paint. I don't have black 3.0 like some awesome crafters do, but I do have this, and I think the effect is enough. Now, let's see the finished result. Full light, so you can get a good idea of all the little figures in there. My flying cyber ninja, my 4 gun toting cyborgs, and here it is with the lights. I think it turned out pretty cool, actually. You can see all the detail in the sewer water, the monster fixating on that cyber ninja, leaping at it, even though that cyborg with the gun is trying to run away from it. The other 3 poised and ready to fire, having had gone down into the sewer seeking what was snatching people in their region. They quickly found out it was something not worth tangling with. Hopefully they're successful. I mean, they got numbers on their side, but that thing is huge, and this is a confined and gross place to fight in. The ninja was attached to the wall using a small metal jeweler's post. I painted it black, drilled a hole in the wall, super glued it in place, and then hit it on the back side of it there underneath its cloak, actually, where it's super glued to connect it. You can kind of see it there. But yeah, little hero of cyber adventurers going down into the poorly lit sewers to fight a giant monster and hopefully get paid. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Now go have an adventure in crafting.